Okay, and we are beginning the third section of the Rambam, Mitzvos Leisaseh, starting from Mitzvah Memhei. We're going to go to the end of the Mitzvah Leisaseh, and then we're going to have a little bit of a shear on the concept of not adding to the Torah. Reish, Mitzvah 245, don't rob. Shnemer says the six, don't rob. Don't move the boundary in Eretz Yisrael to steal land from somebody else. Shnemer says don't move back the boundary of your fellow Zayim, not to transgress the concept of withholding money from someone who you owe. Shnemer says do not withhold from your fellow. Don't deny money if you owe somebody money. Don't deny. Don't make a shvua de falsely denying money owes somebody else. It says don't lie. Claiming to say don't lie falsely regarding money you owe somebody else. Some people think it's a mitzvah. Not. Not to harass somebody else and wrong them in business by overcharging them or underpaying. It says, do not wrong your fellow. Not to wrong somebody verbally by harassing them and saying things negatively. It says, do not wrong your fellow. Do not hurt someone. Verbally, it says don't hurt your fellow, don't pain him. So this is the first of verbal pain, verbal harassment. He said, not to harass a ger specifically. There's an extra lav when it comes to a convert, not to harass them verbally. It says, do not wrong or pain a ger verbally. Not to harass a ger, not to wrong them in business. Shemin says, do not oppress him. So again, a specific lav applies to a ger specifically, the same type of thing. Now it's going to give us the whole thing about when a ger, each lav applies whether you do the verbal harassment or the monetary harassment. Okay, Reish and Daled. If a slave, Evet Kanaini, escapes from his master and he goes there to Yisrael, to give him, not to extradite him, to give him, let him stay at Yisrael, do not turn the slave back to his master, and then the slave has to owe the master the money. Not to harass a slave. This slave specifically, Shem, it says, dwell among you, Shem, the place he chooses, there's an extra lav to give this person, not to mistreat him. Not to mistreat a widow and an orphan. Not to oppress the widow and orphan. Shem says, do not oppress a widow and orphan. What exactly is that referring to? What kind of oppression? So we'll see exactly what kind of mistreatment it refers to by widow and orphan. Not to make an Eved work, the hard work or the degrading work of a typical slave. Shem, it says, do not work with the Eved or the work of a slave. It has to be more dignified, not as hard, no psychological torture. Not to sell the Eved in a way you sell an Eved in a degrading way on the slave box. Shem, it says, don't sell in the way you sell a slave. So the Aved don't work him, make him do backbreaking labor. Shem, it says, not make him work backbreaking labor. So the previous laugh about not working him a typical slave work is a degrading work, having him, shine your shoes in public or whatever. Not to allow a guy who buys a Jew as a slave to work him in backbreaking labor. Shem says later, do not let him be, do not let him rule over him, with harass him or do not oppress him excessively. Do not, when a person buys a Jewish maidservant, he's not allowed to sell it to somebody else. He has to either marry her or wait till she goes free. It says he's not able to sell her. That when a person marries his maidservant, which is the idea, hopefully a person buys a maidservant, the idea, because the father couldn't feed her, so he sold her, the idea is he should marry her. And if he does marry her, treat her as her wife properly, and he's not allowed to withhold from her clothing, food, or conjugal rights, which really applies to any wife. The Torah rights is specifically over here by her. It says, her clothing, food and marriage rights, do not withhold. This also applies to all women. Not to sell a man who takes a woman, a slave, a captive of war forcefully, as we'll learn, concept of as right, that he's not allowed to sell her. Leah shivcha, to be a maid, so Hashem says he's not to sell her. Not to keep her as a maidservant. Leah shivcha, to be a maid, so Hashem says, do not mistreat her, mean do not rule over her in an inappropriate way by using her as a maidservant. Not to desire your friend's wife. It says, do not desire the wife of your fellow. Not to desire the property of your fellow. It says, This is don't desire the property of your fellow. That a worker is not allowed to eat from food that he's being involved in. That, let's say a person who's cutting wheat in the field, working in your vineyards, is not allowed to eat from the produce if it's not a time of Gamar Malacha, as we'll define. If it's time of Gamar Malacha, where it's the final product, if you will, we'll explain what that means in the appropriate place, he could eat. And if it's not the final time, he's not allowed to eat. So besides the fact that it's considered Geneva or Gezela, it's also this extra law. Shem, it says, do not lift the sickle against the standing graining fellow. That a person who is a worker, when he's allowed to, when he's allowed to eat, he's not allowed to take extra, put in his pocket. He's only allowed to eat as much as he eat at the moment. Shemet says, you should eat grapes as your soul desires, to satiation, but no more. Not if you see a lost object, not to pretend you don't see it. Shemet says, do not pretend you don't see it. Don't ignore it. If you see an animal struggling under its load, you have to help the person. It says, don't see the donkey of your fellow struggling and refrain from helping. You have to help him. Not to do perversion and injustice. When it comes to measurements, the storekeeper, the scales and all that. By tradition, we're talking about doing perversion of judgment of measurements, not the judge or the court. We're talking about the perversion of justice when it comes to being the storekeeper. Or the buyer. The buyer uses his own scale. Not to even own injustice scales that says 1 pound. It's 1.5 pounds. You're gonna get more. Or sell, whoever are they dishonest on behalf of the buyer. Yeah, whatever. Shemet says,
The storage would be
right,
less.
exactly. Shemet says, don't have in your house. Shemet says also mishpat, not to perversion and justice. Meaning this pasha in a court case, not to judge injustly, not to pervert justice. Not to take bribery. Shemet says, do not take bribery. Don't honor somebody in a judgment and show him favoritism and be nice to him, and then be mean to the other litigants. Shemet says, don't honor a great person in judgment. A dying is not allowed to be afraid of an evil person if he's afraid to convict him. Shemet says, don't be afraid of anybody. Not to have rachmanos on a poor person and say, well, he's poor, I'm going to say he's innocent. He doesn't have to pay. Shemet says, do not honor a poor person in his fight, in his conflict. Not to be biased in judgment against the person who's a balavera. Just because he's a Baal It says, do not tilt the judgment against your poor person. Poor in this context, meaning spiritually poor. Lamadu, he's poor because he has no mitzvahs. Not to have rachmanos on a person. When it comes to knossos, you might say it's not a monetary loss. The guy stole $100. He was caught. Now he has to pay back $200. He gave $100. I'll have rachmanos. You should have to pay the second $100. The guy got his money back. We don't want from him. No. If the knas is mechuyev, he has to pay him. It says, do not show pity on him. Not to specifically pervert the judgment of a widow or an orphan. A convert or an orphan. Shemet says, do not to pervert the judgment of a convert or an orphan. Not to listen to one of the litigants before the other guy comes. This is also a good thing for therapists and marriage counseling. Yeah, but don't listen to the story until the other guy's there. Shemet says, do not bear a false report. And there's a falseness to the report if one baldin is there, another litigant is not there. When it comes to a capital case, you're not allowed to go after a simple majority to convict the person. Just because the people saying chayev or more than the people saying innocent by one. It's not enough. Shemet says, don't be after the majority for evil. You have to have a majority of two. A simple majority is not sufficient. When one of the dayanim advances an argument to exonerate the person, he's not allowed to advance an argument to say to convict him. He can vote guilty, but he's not allowed to explain why if he another perspective. Shemet says, do not speak of in a trial to influence the other way. Not to appoint a judge who's not wise in Torah, even though he may be very smart in astronomy or doesn't make a difference. Shemet says, but do not show favoritism in judgment. Don't show favoritism and say, wow, I gotta appoint this guy, he's so smart. He's not Talmud Chacham. It's not appropriate. It's not allowed. And Pashup the pasuk is not showing favoritism to the Baldin, but the pasuk we're darshing not to show favoritism when you appoint a yoner. Don't testify false. Hashem, it says Asana and Beracha Eichaker is one of the test dibis, right? Don't testify false against your fellow. Don't allow a person to testify if he's a sinner. Hashem, it says do not place your hand with a Russia to be an evil witness. Meaning, if you are, even if you know it's true and you were there and you both saw it, but if you testify together with him, you let him testify, you're going to validate a Russia. Not to allow a relative to testify. Children and parents should not die at the hands of each other. We learn by tradition. The pasuk saying, fathers cannot die by testimony of the children, and it goes the same thing is true for all relatives, and it's whether it's testimony to good or for bad, either way. Not to rule based on one witness. It says one witness cannot stand against the person. You have to have two witnesses. Not to kill someone who's innocent. Do not murder. What people say in Judaism, it says thou shalt not kill. No, it doesn't. It says don't murder. Killing is fine. Sometimes. Not to paskin based on circumstantial evidence and logic. Unless two witnesses said what happened to him. It says, an innocent and righteous person, don't kill him. So even though whatever makes sense, but it might not be true, and therefore, until there's two witnesses, he's considered innocent. That if a witness testifies at a court case, he's not allowed to go then, unless they have to add to the Sanhedrin. Sometimes you have a Sanhedrin of 23 people, and they have to add, because let's say it's a tie, right? So we learned if it's a tie, or let's say you have 11 saying of this, 11 saying that, one person says, I don't know. So you have to add Dayanim. You're not allowed to add one of the witnesses. Shneimar says one witness cannot answer in terms of being a witness, being a judge. Now the truth is, I believe the Rambam tells us this applies to any court case issue, not just when it applies to Din Nefashis. The Chiddush Din Nefashis is that if you saw what happened, you can't be a judge. If I see someone grab the glasses off your face and they say it's theirs, I can be a judge, even though I saw what happened. I'm not acting as a witness. But when it comes to the nefashis, you just see what happened, you can't be a judge. Ram talks about the case, however, specifically if you act as a witness, you testified, then you can't serve on the bezdin. But that applies to all cases, not just the nefashis. Why it says in nefashis tafka? Because maybe over there that's where the law applies specifically. Okay. A person mechuyev to be executed is not allowed to execute until he first stands in judgment. Right? Fair trial. It says the murderer should not die until he stands in judgment. You now have mercy on the pursuer, a person chasing after somebody else, trying to kill them. You have to, if you can, shoot them in the leg, fine. But if not, then you have to kill them. You have to kill them. Don't have mercy on them before he reaches the victim and kills him. Or if he's going to have relations with somebody who was a chiyuv misa, Shemet says, cut off her hand. Do not your eye should not take pity. That's talking about a case where the woman is trying to protect her husband and she fatally tries to injure the other person, and that's where it says that you have to not show pity. Now over there again, the case is in the pasuk over there is a whole interesting scenario, but that's what this is the mucker of the love. Okay, here's the question: what if a person is chasing somebody else and the issue is not nisakaris? It's not a person chasing after a single girl. There's no issue mis over there. So are you allowed to kill him to prevent him from harming her? It's a good question. The modern answer is yes, but in Torah logic, to kill somebody who's trying to do such a thing, it's a question. It's not an erva, I'm sorry. If she's a married woman, it's an erva. You kill him for sure. All right, a person being forced to do an aveda, don't do anything. You don't punish them because it's not their fault. It says not to the maiden, don't do anything. Don't take a bribe from the person who wants to pay a fine instead of getting executed. It says do not take a bribe from or redemption money from the person from the murderer. Right now, you'll say, "What do you mean? The guy gives $1 billion, you can fix the whole Lubavitch. Doesn't make a difference." A person who killed negligently, and he has to go to the Yer Miklat to Gullus. He wants to pay his way out. Also, you can't take money. It says, "Do not take redemption money to prevent him from running to his city of refuge." Reish Tzadik Zayin 297. Do not stand by the blood. What exactly does that mean? The Rambam says a lot of things. The pasuk shot in the pasuk is not let us stand by when someone else is in danger. You got to save him. The Rambam also uses it as a pasuk in Hilchos of Mamre to tell us not allowed to eat. Oh no, sorry. Okay, good. Shem says, do not stand by the blood of your fellow. Again, the Pashup shot is not to stand by if somebody's in danger and refrain from helping him. Right? The mafia is after him, you don't tell him, even though you heard about it. Not to leave a stumbling block or any kind of hazard. Shem says, do not place blood in your house. That pasuk is talking about not having a gate around your roof. But it means any hazard, really, any dangerous thing. Don't cause a person who doesn't know better to stumble, meaning giving bad advice. It says, do not put a stumbling block in front of the blind. Shin, malchus, a person is chayav to get malchus, to get lashes, to give him only the amount he's been sentenced to, not to add. Right? Some people in the middle of hitting, once you're hitting, have to miss another frask. Now do that. Shem, it says, do not add lest you add. Shin Aleph. Not to l'ragel is to tail bear. To be a yenta, talk about things, even though it's true. Shem, it says, do not go around gossiping. Even if it's not bad. You heard how much this guy got a good deal in the house, oh my gosh, I'll tell you. That's considered an issue of this l'ragel. Shin beish listen believe not to hate another Jew in your heart. Shem, it says do not hate your brother in your heart. Shin gimel shlo halbin pnei adam misol, not to embarrass Jewish people. Shem, a Jewish person. Shem, it says rebuke your fellow. Do not bear avir, because by embarrassing him, meaning even when you're supposed to do the mitzvah of giving him rebuke, you're not allowed to embarrass him. And if you're not giving him a rebuke, for sure you can't embarrass him. Shin dal shleilakim, do not take revenge. Shem, it says, do not take revenge. Shin heish shleilinter, not to bear a grudge. Shem, it says, do not bear a grudge. Shin vav shlikachim alabanim, not to take a mother bird, while she's hovering over her chicks or their eggs. Shem, it says, not take the mother with the children. Right? This is dafka by birds. Take a sheep or the baby, a mother sheep. The baby sheep, there's no laugh. Shin zay shleilikach shar nesek, not to shave the hair of the siman of teras. Like this, the tumma discoloration of teras, or if it's a bald spot, you shave it in a way that you can't tell where the teras starts and finishes. All that's also Shem. It says, do not shave the bald spot. In other words, you shave around it, but you leave a perimeter so you can tell where it is. If you shave the whole entire head, now you know where it is. Now I'll do that. If you have signs of teras, it's yellow hairs or white hairs, depending on the kind of teras it is, not to pluck them out. Shem, it says, be careful regarding the teras discoloration, the teras spot. A Nachal Esan, the valley where the calf was decapitated because of an unsolved murder, you're not allowed to do any work in that valley, or in the ground, that is. You can't plant or plow. Shem, it says, that will not be worked, and not be planted. Now, this Nachal Esan, right? Rambam says it is a valley with a stream. Rashi Chumash says it's an old, hard ground which was never used, right? So two different. Okay, not to allow a sorcerer to live. Shem, it says, do not allow a sorcerer to live. That not to be mechayev a person who is in the first year of marriage, don't make him be involved in any communal necessity, the army, guard duty on the tower. Shem, it says, you should not go for the army. No matter should be passed over him, meaning he shouldn't be required to do anything. So if you get married every year to another woman, you never go to the army. She is basically not to rebel against the Sanhedrin. Authority of the Sanhedrin. It says, do not stray from whatever they inform you. This actually applies, many the Sefer Chinuch says, to the greatest Talmid Chacham of your generation as well. Even if there's no Sanhedrin, technically speaking. Shin Yud Gimel. Not to add to the mitzvah Torah, either the written Torah or the oral Torah. In other words, any Torah mitzvahs. She Perusha. In other words, either mitzvahs that are specific from a pasuk, or even if it's mitzvah, like Aaron told us, there's no Befersha pasuk. We learn by tradition that's the law. I say you want to add also. I'm not going to say there's no pasuk, but I'm going to add this mitzvah based on my understanding or based on whatever. Now I'll do it. It says, the matter I command you to do, that's what you should do. Do not add to it, meaning not allowed to add to the Tarek mitzvahs. How do we have the mitzvahs that are abundant of Chanukah and Purim and all these things? So the Rambam at the end of these leisas says he's going to give us a little bit of a drasha on that. Doubt. Not to subtract from the mitzvah. It says, do not subtract from it. Not to curse a judge. It says, not curse Elikim. We also learned the same pasuk teaches you not allowed to curse Hashem. Not to curse the Nasi. Or what is the Nasi? Either it's the king, which above there's no one else above my authority, or the head of the yeshiva, meaning the head of the Sanhedrin in Eretz Yisrael. Shemet says, "Nasi ba'amcha, Nasi in your nation, do not curse." They both have the title of Nasi, which means theoretically you could have two people at the same time who are considered Nasi, because you could have the Melech and you could have the Reish Sanhedrin. It's not the same person usually. The only person who served both capacities at once was David HaMelech. I'm told us in the Shtalshus of the Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu to Rav Ashi, the only person who was the Balmus of that generation, who was also the king of that generation, was David HaMelech. Yeah. Right? The president and the Supreme Court justice at once. All the truth is that Rambam tells us you could have two kings at once, and both of them apply this law of cursing. So you could have multiple people. Every shev can have their own melech. All right. Shinyan Zayin. Not to curse any Jew. It says, not to curse do not curse a deaf mute, and who can't hear you, and any Jew for sure. Shin Chesh of not to curse a parent. It says, the person curses their parent, she'll die. Shin Tesh of not to hit a parent. It says, a person hits the parent and wounds them, is chayv misa. Shin chav shalei lasis malacha b'Shabbos, not to work on Shabbos. Shem it says isas kol malacha, not to any malacha. Shin chavav shalei halach chutz mitchum medina chadach b'Shabbos, not to walk outside the perimeter of the country or the settlement you're in, or all the details about that, as is the path of travelers do. Why the Rambam adds that is interesting. Okay, Shemet says, "Do not go out. Do not the person not go out of their place on Shabbos." As kids, you always see you're not allowed to travel on Shabbos because you're not allowed to ride a horse on Shabbos. You're not allowed to go in a car on Shabbos. Even walking, right? People do this in the country all the time. In the bungalow colony, they take an hour walk and then on a deserted road next colony. You're not allowed to do that. Not to punish on Shabbos in Benzin. Shemet says, "Do not burn a fire in your dwellings." Simply speaking, you're not allowed to light a fire on Shabbos. It also teaches us that the Sanhedrin is not allowed to punish with the misa of sreifa, of burning, on Shabbos, and that includes any punishment. Not to do work on the first day of Pesach. Shemet says, all work cannot be done. Each day of Yontif, apparently, the first and last day of each Yontif, is a separate leis aseh, to do malacha, and a separate mitzvah to rest. Not to do malacha on the seventh day of Pesach. It says, any work can't be done there. Not to do work on Shavuos. It says, not to do work on the first day of the seventh month, also known as Rosh Hashanah. It says, Ram uses the lashon of the pasuk. Not to do malacha there. Not to do malacha on Yom Kippur. It says, although Yontif it's tam alav, Yom Kippur it's a chiyuv kares. Shin chav chesh l'lasu malacha b'shishol chag hasuk is not to do malacha on the first day of Sukkot. Shem it says b'kom malacha l'lasu not to do any malacha on that day. So chol hamoyed we'll learn is a separate. It's not a leis aseh necessarily per se as every other day. According to the Rambam, the isim malacha and chol hamoyed is only the Rabbanon. All right, shin chav tesh l'lasu malacha b'yom hashmish chag. Not to do malacha on the 8th day of the Chag, the holiday, which Stam Chag is Sukkot. We call this, of course, Shmini Atzeres. Shemet says, do not do any work. Okay. Shin Lam, excuse me. Not to have not to have intimate relations with a mother. Shemet said, now we have all that ayahs, yeah? She's your mother, do not uncover nakedness. Not to have relations with one sister. Shemet says, the daughter, the nakedness of your sister, the daughter of your father. Do not uncover. Not to have relations with the father's wife if it's not your mother. Shemet says, do not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife. Not to have relations with the person's paternal sister. Sorry, yeah. So Shin Lamed Aleph was a sister Bechlal, and Shin Lamed Gimel is Dafka with the sister from your father. So in Tif Mitzvah explains that if it's a sister only from your mother, so then there's only one love. If you share the same father, whether you share the same mother or not, then there's two lavim. Shemat says, the erva of the daughter of your father's wife. Not to uncover the nakedness of your son's daughter. Shemat says, the erva, the nakedness of your son's daughter. Not to have relations with one's son's daughter, with the granddaughter. Not to have relations with the granddaughter of your daughter's daughter. Shemat says, or the daughter of your daughter. Do not uncover the nakedness. Now, what about one's daughter? It says a granddaughter. So now it says Shilam Advav. So the Gav is ever not to have relation with the daughter. Which pasuk is it? No pasuk. Why is there not said? Also bas, since it says in elevation with the daughter's daughter, which is a further relative, shashkim and abbas, it didn't have to say the daughter. We learn by tradition. Now, usually, if it's not a beferish pasuk, it's derived from a kavod chayim. Madach, you can't have a relation with your granddaughter. Vashi, you can't marry your daughter. So that's not considered an independent lav. The Rambam says no. By tradition. The issue of having a relationship with the daughter is forbidden, like any other issur. It's actual lav. Shem it says they're your relative, etc. Now, if you wouldn't have this special limud in Piyashmua, and you're going to try to include a daughter as a leisa say independently in Mekabel Chaimer, that would be an issue of Baltesif, of adding to the Torah. Now, so we have a Piyashmua that it's a Beferish Shalav independently. Shin Lamed Zayin Shalagalis, Eva says she should be not to marry a mother and her daughter. Shem it says, Eva says she should be not uncover the nakedness of mother and her daughter. Shin Lamed Ches Shalagalis, Eva says she should not to live with a woman and her granddaughter, meaning her son's daughter. Shem says this bas bina with her son's daughter. She should bas bita, not to marry a woman and her granddaughter through her daughter's daughter. Shem says this bas bita do not take her and her daughter's daughter. Not to have relations with your mother's sister. Shem it says, do not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister. Not to have relations with one's father's sister. Shem it says, do not uncover the nakedness of your father's sister. Not to have relations with your father's brother's wife. Shem, even after she dies, he divorces her. Shem it says, do not come close to his wife. Shimon Gimel. Not to have relations with your son's wife, even if he dies divorced her. Shimon says, do not uncover the nakedness of your daughter-in-law. Shimon Dal, not to have relations with your brother's wife. Shimon says, do not uncover the nakedness of your brother. Shimon Heish not to have relations with your wife's sister. Shimon says, do not take a woman and her sister. Shin Mem Vav not to uncover the nakedness, mean not to have relations with a woman who is impure through menstruation. Nida, even if she's your own wife. Shimon says, do not come close to a woman when she is tummy because of her flow. Shimon Zayin not to have relations with a married woman. Shnemet says, do not give your lying to a married woman, the wife of your fellow. Not to have relations with an animal. Shnemet says, with any animal, do not give your lying for seed. That pasuk is addressed to a man. For a woman not to have relations with an animal. Shemet says, a woman should not stand before an animal. That man may not have relations with a man. Shemet says, with a man, one may not lie, as one lies with a woman. Not to uncover the nakedness of a father. Besides for the issue of a man being with a man, being with one's father is a second lav. It says, not uncover the nakedness of your father. Not to have relations with your father's brother. Again, these are all also anyway because they're men, but there's an extra lav tacked on top of that in these relations, in these relatives. Shemet says, not uncover the nakedness of your father's brother. Do not come close to any person you're not allowed to marry from the list we just gave. Coming close in any way that might cause to uncover inappropriateness. Chibuk, hugging, renisha, kissing, remiza, and hinting, the kvitza, and other kinds of signs. It says, kol sher besare, any one of kind flesh, meaning any relative, or another man's wife, for anything which is forbidden, not come close to uncover the nakedness. We know by tradition, when it says over here, it's not talking about actual relations, any kind of closeness which could afterwards lead as a follow-up to forbidden relations is not allowed. And there are even people who are careful not to hug another man. Shinun Dalin. Shalei Yisrael Mamzer Bas Yisrael. A mamzer, a person born of a forbidden relationship, who's a chiv kares, right? May not marry a regular Jewish girl. He can only marry, let's say, for example, a ger tzedek. He can only a geris. He can only marry, another mamzer. Shem. It says the other mamzer called Hashem. A mamzer cannot come into the congregation of Hashem. Shinun Hey Shalili Tia Kadesha. He even develops Balin Ksuva of Kedusha, not to have a Kadesha. What is a Kadesha? A woman, even if it's a committed relationship, just don't them two with each other, but she doesn't have Ksuba Kedushin. For a melech, it's called a pilegesh, basically. When the Ram, it's also for everybody. So let's say, Shem, it says Leisa Kadesha. There shouldn't be a Kadesha. In other words, and even that's even if it's so basically the point is that anytime it's a relationship without kedushin, it's usher. Whether it's a committed relationship, the two live together, boyfriend girlfriend, or it's a one-time thing. If a person divorces his wife, she gets remarried, and then that marriage ends because he dies or divorces her. He may not remarry his divorcee. It says the first husband may not take her back as a wife. That if a woman's husband dies childless, she's not allowed to marry anybody except for one of the brothers of the deceased, or if she gets chalitza. But if that doesn't happen, she cannot marry anybody else yet. It says the wife of the deceased cannot marry anybody else. A person who forces a woman into relations has to marry her. He's not allowed to divorce her ever without her consent. It says he never sent her out. A person who falsely accuses his wife of unfaithfulness, so also he's not allowed to divorce her without her consent. It says he may not ever send her out. A person who's been castrated may not marry a Jewish daughter. It says a person of crushed testicles is not allowed to come into the congregation of Hashem. Here the word Tzuadaka by means with an aleph, like it is in our minhag. You're not allowed to castrate a male animal, whether it's an animal or a bird or a fish. An animal, domesticated or a wild animal or a bird. It says, do not do this in your land. Not to appoint in a position of leadership on the Yidden, any type of position of leadership, a convert. It says, a foreigner, in this case referencing a ger, may not be of position of leadership over you, because the whole concept, but there are exceptions, but with derech klal, the idea is that the ger tzedek is supposed to be learning from us how to integrate into Klal Yisrael and what he does and how he thinks. If the gerim take over, they don't necessarily know. They're supposed to be receiving the tradition, not giving us the tradition. Now there are exceptions. The Shema Naftalian, right? They were the ger tzedek and they were chachamim. But generally speaking, the system, the ger tzedek, the Baal Tshuva, is supposed to be learning from the established community and not being the head of the community. Shin Samach Gimel. But you have sometimes when that happens, it doesn't work out well. I don't want to say on camera what that looks. Okay, anyway. I mean, I can give examples from.
You have to repress, no?
No, it's playing. A king cannot have too many horses. Shem says, no, not too many horses. How much can he have? We'll see. He can't have too many wives. How many can he have? We'll see. Shem says, he can't have too many wives because if you have too many wives, they'll have too many mother-in-laws. Too many mother-in-laws. All right. He's not allowed to have excessive amounts of silver and gold more than necessary. Shem says, he may not have excessive gold and silver. These are the 650 mitzvahs that was said to Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai. They were said to him. The Kol saying, and they were said in the general principle, like we said now, the melech can't have too much gold and silver. That's a general mitzvah. Or put it in the details of how much could he have and what's the exception and what in the details specifically, right? But if it's his money, but it's in escrow and in the investment stock market, but his name is on whatever. All those general principles and those specifics and the details shall call a mitzvah and the explanation of every mitzvah. That is the old Torah we described in Akdama. We call it Akdama, that the Bezdin received each generation from the generation prior, going back to Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, there are other mitzvahs that were new mitzvahs that were instituted after Matan Torah. The Kavoi, some Nevi'im, the Chacham, they were established by the Nevi'im because the mitzvah listened to a Navi, or the Chacham because the mitzvah listened to the Sanhedrin. And they spread out to Jewish people, which is important because if you don't accept it, then its authority is questionable. Going. Megillah important. But Tainus, Tisha B'Av, fasting on Tisha B'Av. And the Ram doesn't mention the other fast, but Tisha B'Av is the most important. Yeah, the Eruvin, the mitzvah of Eruvin, right? The concept of Eruvin, the Yadayim and the concept of Yadayim being tamei and washing your hands before you eat bread. or b'chal before you eat wet fruit. The whole concept. So we have how many mitzvahs did Rambam count? Megillah, Chanukah, Tainus, Tisha B'av, Eruvin, Yadayim. That's 6. Usually we say there's 7 mitzvahs Rabbanon, right? Which the Rambam didn't mention which one. They're the Shabbos. Not sure why. All right, v'yesh l'chol mitzvah elim perushim v'tidei. All these mitzvahs also have many details. Light them in there however you want, whatever, as long as your heart's in the right place. No, this is. We're going to explain everything, says Rambam. Now, all these mitzvahs that were these new mitzvahs that were there's a word I'm looking for, that were not novelized, initiated. Yeah. All right. We have to receive them. We have to keep them. Why? It doesn't. Where's not in the Torah? Shemet says leisas ma'adavar. We just said the leisas say right. Not straying away from the Sanhedrin tells you that was mitzvah number. I forgot which one it was. All right, it was one of the mitzvahs we had today. All right. So not to stray from what the Sanhedrin tells you. The Einim Teisha mitzvah say not considered adding to the Torah because the Torah says listen to the Sanhedrin. So if that's the case, why the Torah warn us? Do not add, do not subtract. I shouldn't say I decided now there's a new mitzvah today. You have to recycle. It's a mitzvah Torah. No one's going to listen to me. It's not important. So what is an example where, if you have to listen to the Sanhedrin, and whatever they tell you is a mitzvah, what's a scenario where you have a problem of adding to the Torah? Whatever the Sanhedrin tells you, Megillah, Mikra Megillah, right? 200 years later, Chanukah, 500 years earlier, Shlomo HaMelech makes a mitzvah of washing your hands for the bread. All that, you're never adding to the Torah. So what's an example of what's the problem? How could you, why is the Torah worried about adding? Or what's it warning you against doing? The Navi, or even the Sanhedrin, is not allowed to make something new and say that the Hashem told him to add this mitzvah to the Torah, or subtract from the entire mitzvahs. So, the Sanhedrin who says you have to read the Megillah on Purim, if they're saying that now it's the 614th of the entire mitzvahs, that's the problem. So as long as we make a disclaimer that we're not trying to add to the Torah, it's fine. It's like a very technical thing, but the point is to hold pure the concept of the Taryag mitzvahs, and that's why when there's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, let's say the concept of Safek d'Rabbanan l'Kula. Some explain that even though anytime there's a Safek in Torah, you have to be machmir. So if you have to listen to the Sanhedrin, and you're not sure if you did the mitzvah d'Rabbanan, you have to be machmir also. It's Mat Torah l'Chayra. So the people explain the Chum established the halacha in the mitzvahs that they made that if it's a suffix, you go l'kula as a way of clarifying that they're not trying to add to the Taryag mitzvahs. Okay, if the bezdin it says im navi, I'm not sure why, but dafka with a navi, the Sanhedrin doesn't have to have a navi necessarily. There were no neviim in times of Chanukah, still mitzvah d'Rabbanan. But okay, are you says also im navi the lashon? Im navi. Okay, I thought maybe it said Oinavi. All right. That there should be at that time the Sanhedrin or a Navi who existed at that time. That there should be Derech Takana, he establishes, he adds as a way of institution, as Takana, as an enactment. Or Derech Hidah as an instruction, Derech Gezeder, or as a decree to prevent people from being over Avera. Ein Zayte Sevas, that's not adding to the Torah. They're not saying Hashem came to me and said that you should make an Erev, or to read the Megillah Chanukah in its time. If they said that, they add to the Torah. In other words, if they're saying Hashem told them to, and Hashem told them to add to it, right? It could be it is through Nevuah, the Megillah, right? Through HaKadosh at least, right? That the Chum instituted Purim. And the Kacha, here's what they're saying. Here's what we the Sanhedrin are saying. Shanavim Nim Bezdin, taking the Nevi'im with the Bezdin instituted them. And they command us to read the Megillah in its proper time to remember the praise of Hashem, to mention the praise of Hashem, and the salvation He made for us. So He was close to us in our cry to Him. Should we bless Him and praise Him, and to make known to the coming generations. That's true what He says in the Torah. Who is such a great nation who has a God close to them, who answers them when they call? That's the reason why these were established. For example, when it comes to Chanukah and Purim, Tisha B'av is what? As a takana, not to prevent anything, just to simply as we should mourn the Beis Hamikdash, to remember what we lost, right, and to bring it back. Eruvin is taka to prevent us from being over in Isser, so is Yadayim. Okay, that this concept applies to every mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Let's say whether it's a positive mitzvah, or whether it is a negative mitzvah. Okay, and tomorrow we're going to go into the next part.